Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion, Revenue Up in a Down Year, an Open Forum for Publishers. I'm Jordan Stein, Senior Marketing Manager here at OpenWeb, and I'll be hosting today's discussion. I'm joined here by three very accomplished leaders from Hive Media Group and OpenWeb. Thank you to Azhar Salim, Grant Hoxworth, and Francis Turner for taking the time to be with us today. But before we begin, I want to briefly introduce OpenWeb for anyone who isn't too familiar with us or isn't exactly sure of what we do, and then we'll get right on to the event. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Joel Behar, OpenWeb Senior Vice President of Business Development, to give a quick overview. Thank you, Joel.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. So really quickly to tell you a little bit about OpenWeb, we are a mission-driven company, and OpenWeb is on a mission to improve the quality of discourse taking place online and really to build a healthier web where content creators of all kinds are empowered to thrive. To put it simply, our mission is to create an internet that is 1, positive for people, 2, equitable for digital media, and 3, healthy for society. Today, we're fortunate, grateful, and proud to be working with over 3,000 publishers worldwide. Some of them you can see on this screen, like the Wall Street Journal, Yahoo, HuffPost, Hearst, Trusted Media, and many more. And we're hosting over more than 100 million monthly active users per month. This scale gives us some really unique and powerful insight into what works for publishers who are always trying to stay ahead of their competition in a space that, as we know, is constantly evolving. And what we find to be a consistent theme across our network of partners is that all of them are trying to drive engagement and retention, trying to convert unknown users to known registered entities, and drive valuable first-party data as a result. And at OpenWeb, we're totally aligned with these goals and are laser focused on providing solutions that are focused on the needs of our partners. And we're able to do this with what we like to call OpenWeb OS, our A to Z community engagement platform that enables publishers and brands to build strong, direct relationships with their audiences. It's built upon 3 core pillars. 1, robust real-time commenting backed by the most sophisticated moderation technology on the market. 2, expanded community experiences like topic tracking, personalized notifications, email newsletters, polling, and reactions. And 3, first-party data activation. So how do publishers take all of these insights and data points from the above community experiences and drive those into quantifiable business outcomes? So that's a little bit about OpenWeb. Before we get started, a note for the audience today. If after the discussion you're interested in learning more about anything that we do on the OpenWeb side, you have a few options. You can reply to any of the emails that we've sent you leading up to the event, or you can simply reach out to me via email, which we'll put my email into this chat now, and we're more than happy to have a conversation. So thank you all and enjoy the webinar today.
Thank you. So before our first topic, let's meet the leaders with us today. And we'll start with Azhar Salim. Azhar is the Chief Technology Officer at Hive Media Group, and in his role, he oversees all technology, including ad tech and MarTech. Thanks for joining us, Azhar.
Thanks for having me.
And also here is Grant Hoxworth. Grant is the VP of Strategy at Hive Media Group, overseeing all revenue and business strategy activity, which includes monetization setup, A/B testing, and managing the analyst team at Hive Media. Welcome, Grant.
Yeah, good to be here.
And finally, we have Francis Turner. Francis is the Chief Advertising Officer here at OpenWeb. He co-founded and launched the UK's first native ad platform, and that works content app, which merged with AdUlike to become one of Europe's leading native ad platforms. Thanks for being here, Francis.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Thank you.
Great. And with that, let's move on to the discussion. For question 1, we should start off by asking about Hive Media Group. For those of you who may not be familiar, Hive Media owns and operates over 40 publishing brands around the world. And across their network, they've earned over 1 billion monthly page views in Q4 last year. It's a remarkable result, and it gives them a unique perspective on the revenue and audience questions that we're all asking right now. So Azhar and Grant, can you talk more about how Hive Media formed into the publishing company it is today, and what you can point to that helped to drive over 1 billion monthly page views? Azhar, we can start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think from the inception of Hive, we've been very data focused, and we track a lot of that data internally. We don't. That gives us a lot of flexibility to explore any opportunities that we can see, whether it's on the SEO front, the social front, whatever it may be. And then we A/B test pretty rigorously at any given point. I think we have 50 to 100 A/B tests running across all the different sites. And that kind of sort of mentality is built into everything that we do about how we're testing. So everything we try to make config driven. That allows us to iterate fast, move fast, and take advantage of an opportunity when we see one. Like in Q4, we saw like there was a new engagement content type that was doing well for us. So we invested more heavily in that because the data was telling us and we were able to move quickly enough.
Great. And Grant, any thoughts to augment that?
Yeah, I mean, I really add to it. Definitely a tech-first, data-driven company. We test everything from the monetization side with the partners we're working with, how it's affecting the page. And I think it kind of comes down to the whole approach of the website is an ecosystem. If you change one thing, it can affect something else. So you could add a partner that could be performing really well, but maybe hurt the user experience or vice versa. So we really, testing is a full-time job here, and that's crucial. And I think, Az and his team have done a great job of tracking everything, which makes it a lot easier to understand what's going on with our website. So that coupled with, focus on user experience and just internal feedback loop of here's what we're seeing, working with the tech team, giving feedback to the content team about what we see doing well, not doing well, and prioritizing those key tasks, I think are what helped us succeed.
And Francis, any observations with what you're seeing at Hive Media and how you see it from the OpenWeb side?
I think I'm still learning a lot about Hive myself. Since the acquisition, but it's a great business, great publisher, really strong content, and super data driven in terms of kind of everything the guys have said. And we work closely with them when we're kind of launching new products and how we can work together to learn fast, test fast, fail fast, and win fast as well. So great business, and we're continuing that kind of partnership as we continue to move forward.
All right, thanks everyone. On to our second topic, and this one impacts everyone here today. Most likely, it's about ad revenue. So right now we're living in pretty strange time across media, one where we have to think creatively in order to keep growing fast. Programmatic markets showed some signs of slowing down last year, and that led to lower than expected revenue for many. And for that reason, some struck deals into the private marketplaces, but not everyone can support those kinds of initiatives. Others have set up affiliate or retail media programs, but again, they're not exactly right for everyone either. There isn't really a consensus on what to do next or how to keep growing quickly in the interim. So here's the question. With some reports showing RPM slowing down, where are some of the opportunities for publishers to stay ahead of their growth goals? Which changes happening in the market are worth exploring deeper? And Francis, I'll let you take this one first, and we can go to Grant and Azhar.
Sure, thank you. So I think the RPM piece is interesting. There is kind of a lot of doom and gloom around, but actually, that isn't necessarily something that we've seen in a number of areas. We've seen, data from Stack and various other areas where we've compared that to our own RPMs and CPMs within the SSP, and we haven't necessarily seen that across the board. So although there is kind of, some negativity around there, I think we do also need to kind of keep an eye on it and think actually, look at the data and really understand, kind of where we are and look at that and see that actually there are opportunities. I think one thing that we always try to do is even from an agile perspective back in the day, and with OpenWeb even more so, is partner partner first, and that partner with the tech vendors that you're working with, the publishers that you're working with. I think speak to your peers and do things like this, today, where you're finding out what's working, what's working for different people in different areas, right? Because as Grant said earlier, you found, or as I think it was said earlier, you found a particular content unit that was working well. How can that work with, you speak to your peers, you'll find these different opportunities. I think, again, talking about Hive in terms of being that kind of test and learn and be data driven, sometimes you do go on your gut, and I think you have to look at opportunities and do the testing around that. But I think, be data driven around kind of what can work. I think, we've seen big areas around Dentsu did a big report, their trends report, where they're talking about content, they're talking about community, and they're talking about commerce. I mean, you touched on the commerce side of things. Retail media is obviously a big opportunity, but is that right for all brands? I think from an Agilite perspective, from an OpenWeb perspective, so I still do that every now and again. From an OpenWeb perspective, community and how you can engage your audiences and drive value for your audiences with different products to drive value, to keep them coming back in and drive first party data is super important. I think big topics at the moment, kind of where we see is we see attention as a big topic in the industry. So how people can, previously you had CTR, and which is still there, CTR and viewability, but actually attention, how are people actually engaging with those ads, and there's a few different models around that. We've actually just partnered with a company called Adelaide. Sustainability is very much on topic, and as it should be. So again, we've partnered with Scope 3 around how we can create green media products, and I think that's super important for businesses themselves, but also for the wider world. And then there's also kind of the DEI topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That needs to be looked at, but it needs to be done in a thoughtful way, and a way that kind of makes sense. It's not just about trying to look for a dollar. It's actually, how can you actually help these communities to grow as well. So those are some things that I think are relevant.
Pretty comprehensive. Thank you, Francis. Grant, anything you'd like to add to Francis's comments?
Yeah, I think what Francis was alluding to too is like there's not really some secret sauce here, some shortcut. It's really sticking with some of the fundamental best practices in terms of what you do with partners. And I think if you're on the revenue monetization side for a long time, you've gotten beat down with testing partners, adding, removing, and the reality is you kind of have to keep testing. We see the new SSPs emerging, in the last year or so that I felt have been more stagnant, in years past. So just sticking with constantly testing, new partners, ensuring you have all the right, settings for those. Obviously pushing towards load times, user experience is crucial. These SSPs now have all the data they want to enrich to advertisers for truly the best, experience and results for them. So you have to provide those, results in order to get, the proper rates. So obviously we talk a lot about data collection and testing, and that's core, but just being open to new partners. And I think one thing for us, like floors, traditionally, we've tried a lot of different iterations. We've seen success in some areas and some in old, and more dynamic floor settings lately have been doing well, and even at maybe on traditional times with seasonality or the right, country or layout type. So yeah, sticking with the fundamental tests and continuing to tweak, make things faster, better, and yeah.
Great. And Azhar, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, generally speaking, publishers are often on the receiving end of a lot of changes in the global marketplace, like Google Core SEO changes, or like the Core Web Vitals focus, whatever it may be. So we're used to change. So I would say, just to echo something that Grant mentioned, like being open to that. We had a lot of assumptions that we retested last year, and found that maybe what was old is now new again. I mean, old things that previously didn't work or vice versa are now working again. So being open to that change, I think we had some old monetization partners that we parted with in a maybe in 2019 that we retested last year and earlier this year and are doing well again. Beyond that, I would say we've been focusing internally on more automation, just to make the workflow smoother for a lot of our internal teams, whether it's the content team, marketing teams, etc. And then just alerting, automation, and playing around with AI. What can we do with it to help smoothen things out? And lastly, echo again like what Grant said. Like we've done tests both ways on the monetization and user experience side. Like in some cases, improving the user experience, allows you to get a little bit more time on page, a little bit more session depth for that user session, and that eventually leads to a better monetization outcome. So taking away things is also healthy. So finding opportunities and taking advantage of them, basically.
All right, excellent. Thank you, everyone. On to our third topic here. And this one is about experimentation. Everyone's looking for advantages in a tough economy. The incremental wins that keep readers on site longer, brings them back more often, or compels them to register. The reason to run tests constantly are abundant: to try different registration options, prices, offers, or methods to get people to sign up for something valuable. But testing requires a lot of discipline and patience. You need clear hypothesis, goals, and resources to act on the data that you're collecting. So with all that said, what kind of on-site testing should publishers actively work toward to drive growth and create more engaging experiences? What metrics should they be defining as they outline their hypotheses? Grant, you can take this question first and we'll go down.
Yeah, I mean, I think we obviously were touching on this in the last few questions. Like there's no, fluffing, the data for these demand partners to get, better rates or to drive more traffic. You see the trends of pushing towards faster websites, cleaner experiences, better content is gonna kind of win out, so to speak. So we are super focused on, core web vital testing. What can we do to load the website better, to load images better, to load ads, more effectively? And so that's a huge piece to every test. We are constantly looking at core web vitals when we're, adding a partner, removing one, changing the layout. If something generates more revenue, we also want to make sure it's not compromising speed, and we'll often take a hit on small hit on RPM to have a faster page, because we see the user experience grows. To Az's point earlier, like session depth, time on page are crucial metrics for us when we look at our content and when we give feedback to the content team. So that focus on UX, viewability, and the core web vitals is essential for us to keep the users engaged.
Great. And Azhar, anything to add to that?
I mean, to mention that, sort of address something that you mentioned earlier, like about like trying to get users to subscribe and things like that. I think often we forget that users aren't very educated on how the internet really works and how it's ad supported, and finding the right marketing language there to like get them to convert is interesting. I think with the experimentation though, something that we've learned a lot over the years is like what works for one site may not work for the others. Like as you mentioned, we own and operate multiple sites, and each has their own demographics and different user groups, and so we have to test on each website to make sure that it works across the sites. And depending on the test that you're doing, you might need to run it for a long time. So if your focus is on return user percentage, or like how many users are coming back, then you need to run it for sufficiently long to make sure that there's no adverse impact for whatever you're testing. And then, like as Grant mentioned, we focus a lot on the balance between revenue and UX metrics. So on the revenue side, we'll have impressions per session and revenue per session and CPMs, viewability, all of that. And on the engagement side, we'll have the core web vitals, page depth, time on session. And then we try and balance all of that to see, how do we want to proceed with the actual treatments, and which one do we give more allocation, or which one do we tweak. So yeah, the experimentation is hard. Like Grant said, it's a full-time job for us. Like we have multiple people focused on it throughout the week, on taking things to the next level. So it's hard, but it's important, and I think it's core to improving whatever it is that you're focused on, right? So
I would
Great.
also
And go ahead, Grant.
It's not like a one size fits all. I think the granularity of the data that we have and we use to test is huge. Like Az was talking about, different devices, right, and different sites all can have different reactions to the same change. Maybe the content's different, or the vertical, or browser and geo are all things that we're looking at for each test, because something that works on US may not in Canada, or on one site in health may not work on history. So we look at that, granularity, browser, site, device, OS for each test to make sure we're not, helping Android but hurting iOS or something like that.
And Francis, anything to add to those comments?
No, to be honest with you, I think the guys have pretty much covered the majority of pieces there. I think looking at the content experiences that you're giving the users is key. That value trade off for what they're getting. Are you creating value in terms of the content, but also the kind of other areas to make the user feel part of the site and part of the community is key. I think from an ad tech perspective, from a vendor perspective, as an SFP, previously as Agile, how partners are connecting to the publishers. Are you connecting via pre-bid client server? Are you doing a direct OpenRTB connection? Are you going by TAM? These different ways to connect. And again, it's not, as Grant said, it's not a one size fits all. And it's not a one size fits all at any given time. Things can change, seasonality, all these different elements that come into it. So it's always a bit of a moving feast, but I think those are good points to think about.
All right, thanks everyone. Before we move on to our final topic, I want to remind everyone to start sending your questions into the Q&A. If you haven't yet, I see a couple have already come in. Or if you prefer, get ready to raise your hand and we'll activate your mic. We'll dive into the Q&A right after this question. And this one is about balancing the user experience and SEO with revenue goals. So publishers have once again found themselves in a state of upheaval from Google's recent algorithm changes. In the span of 1 month, Google released 3 revisions, namely their helpful content and core updates that massively impacted content rankings. It didn't just hit publishers that have low quality content. Premium publishers, ones who follow all of Google's principles, were affected too. In some cases, it caused a huge drop in traffic. Many are still adjusting content strategy in response, and all the while, we have to consider the entire on-site experience now more than ever. For example, if there are too many ads on a page with great content, you might get docked for viewability by Google. So in response to Google, how should publishers balance their UX strategy with their revenue goals? Azhar, I'll let you take this final one to start off.
This one's hard. It's something we're all actively working on as well. And yeah, I think you're a little bit at the, like I mentioned earlier, publishers are used to everything changing around us. So you just have to adapt and keep moving. And yeah, I think we've been focused more on just what Grant mentioned. Like at the end of the day, like if we stick to the good fundamentals, we'll hopefully be less affected by these changes. So focus on better content, better keyword targeting, better core web vitals and user experience. And yeah, I mean, that's been more or less the way we've been moving, sort of shifting towards more recently, is just that, yeah, keep the fundamentals solid. And every year, like it's the battle between core web vitals and monetization, at least on our side, like that's the opposing forces. And so it's a matter of trying to go from needs improvement down to good, and if all of the different core vitals, we have been going through them one at a time, and like working down the list. So yeah, this year hopefully we'll address the last remaining ones. And yeah.
Great. And Grant, any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of tricks here. This is you're at the mercy of Google's rules and changes, and so I think staying up to date with not just what they're releasing, but also looking back at where things are headed are ways that you're gonna hopefully end up on the positive side of these algorithm updates. But the truth is, it's really engagement and speed, right? That's almost everything tied to these updates is about how reputable is your content, how engaged is your audience, and how fast is your website. So it's definitely a tough balance in terms of driving the same amount of revenue as pages move. What used to be an AMP specific Google page that they'd send traffic to is now sort of the levels of speed they want every page to be at. So you have to look constantly at ways to improve how you load the website, how you pull things away from the website to add to the experience. I think sometimes taking stuff away is the biggest positive that we see. And having a great tech team that's measuring everything is like critical. I don't know how you could do all this stuff without the level of data that we become accustomed to with all the testing we do.
And Francis, any final thoughts before we move on to the Q&A?
To be honest with you, I will bow to the guys' SEO experience than myself. To be honest with you,
Perfect.
Yeah, I think they've kind of nailed it.
All right, thanks, Francis. All right, so now we've learned a lot, covered a lot. It's time to hear from you and the audience. It looks like we have a few questions already sent in. So let's start with the most recent one we received. This one was sent anonymously to Grant specifically. It says, Grant mentioned dynamic flooring. We've always found price floor optimization is a very manual process. Just wondering if he can expand on dynamic price for strategies.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and I do think it's very unique to every publisher, every website, right? How long is your time on page? What's your session depth? What's your domain authority? Like, the rates that you get. So again, I would say we're super data driven. We look at, CPMs by partner, by page depth, by different articles based on their time on page, and try to establish, starting with conservative rules and inching up until we find the right balance of, a higher rate, but still filling, impressions. And I think everyone has to do that for themselves. What's going to work for one side of ours is not going to work over there. And like I said, the granularity of browsers and devices is just another wrinkle. So I personally think you really have to go beyond the traditional Google hard floor settings to push these partners to maximize the competition. I wouldn't say we've mastered it by any means. We've just seen maybe more progress with being a little bit more intelligent than we were with fixed floors. And yeah, but like I said, super data driven and granular, not just a hard fixed floor, works for us.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is it's become a little bit easier with the later versions of Prebid. I think before they had the floors module, you have to manually tailor your floor to each individual adapter, and it's a lot simpler now, which allowed us to really expand these tests. And then because we manage Prebid in-house, we can make those adjustments and change the floors on the fly. There's different. My understanding is that you can work with different third-party providers who plug into Prebid through the floors module and update you can have them sort of send down different floors dynamically. We chose to do it in-house and try a few different strategies, start with a really high floor that's dependent on, like Grant said, side device geo, and then decays, and then we change the decay rate for a few different strategies and see which one works best. We test them all multivariate test against each other to see, which one does better for a specific group of users.
Excellent. Thank you both.
The
For
other thing I'd
taking
add
on.
is like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not, it's also not consistent across time. Like you have to understand the seasonality of our industry too, and adjust accordingly. So yeah, not an easy task, but I think if you have the ability to continue to test, that's the key.
All right. Thank you both for that. Appreciated. We have another question. I think this one is probably for Francis. It was sent anonymously. It says attention is growing as a way to measure ad effectiveness, but there isn't really an agreed upon definition of it, which makes it hard to optimize for. How do you define attention as a KPI?
Good question. I think, a lot of time there are trends in the industry, and some of these trends are relevant and some of them are not. I think attention very much is, and it's been growing in importance for a while now. I think the key thing around, or one of the key things around attention is, okay, attention delivers an outcome. There needs to be a reason just for doing it, right? We're not just doing it for reason's sake. And it needs to be delivering an outcome. So working, with your partners to understand, what is the outcome that this attention is going to drive from a brand perspective. Is it time on site? Is it dwell time? Is it page views, CPA, leads, whatever it may be? But understanding what the metric is that it's going to do. And then, really, I think, you need to be working with a good partner. As I mentioned earlier, we've started working with Adelaide, who's kind of leader in the space. I think their definition of attention, so I'll quote it from the masters rather than from myself, would be more around it's the creative relevance, the audience, and the media quality. You can have an ad on page, but if it's in the bottom right hand corner and it's floating and it's annoying and no one really sees it, that's one thing, right? But actually, is the ad in feed? Is it that with the content? Is it where the user is engaging? Is it actually maybe in the comment section where users are commenting? There's these elements around that. So I think it's a combination of the creative, the audience, and the media quality in terms of the ad placement, I think would be my definition.
All right, thank you, Francis. Another question here, this one sent anonymously from the audience. It says, I'm hearing more about generative AI playing a bigger role in content publishing, including for my CEO. Where do you think AI can be used to produce better on-site experiences? Azhar and Grant, I feel like you two probably have some opinion about this, so I'll let Azhar, I'll let you go first on this one.
Yeah, I'll let Grant speak to the content side of things. The only thing I'll mention from our testing is we're working with our content team on adding some of this into our CMS, to make it easier for the content team to prompt ChatGPT, for example. The one thing I would just be wary of is it has a tendency to be very confidently incorrect. So that we're trying to train it and train our writers and content team as well on how to prompt it to find the right sources or sources that we think are probably less likely to be incorrect. And then I would say, yeah, it's very nascent still in that from a publisher perspective, we're part of a few Slack groups where there's other publishers and we chat a lot. And one of the things that's still very up in the air with generative AI and how we can use it is, how it affects publishing. So if SEO is a big part of who you are and the users get their questions answered directly through Bing Chat or whatever, they're not coming to your site anymore. So where do we draw the line on our robust.txt on how we want our content to be scraped and stuff like that? So it's very still very new, and we're still all trying to figure it out together. But yeah, I'll let Grant speak to how we're using it at Hive right now.
Yeah, I think to Az's point, I think we're treading very carefully on how we use it. We're definitely not the publisher jumping all in and having AI write our content. I think right now it's it's a tool for efficiency. It's a tool to help us be more organized, get outlines, go through ideas, go through sources, just a more optimized, I guess, search engine for us and how we ideate and come up with topics to write about. I think we're all optimistic about maybe where it could go and the possibility of, feeding some data back into it to find what content does well and help push us towards new topics. But we're definitely not using it to like leverage writing content yet. And it'll be interesting to see how Google handles. I'm sure tons of people are spinning up websites that are purely, AI driven, and are those going to steal search traffic? And I think if you've poked around enough with AI, that it doesn't always spit out the cleanest, stories or articles to read. So I think you, at least right now, you still really much need the human touch to have good, high quality content. And for now, we're hoping it stays that way.
Very timely, but glad to hear what you guys think about that. Thank you both for diving into it. Another anonymous question here. This one's a pretty brief one. I think we can take it pretty quickly. It says, what tools do you use for A/B testing and to monitor revenue metrics?
So this is another basically full-time job for us at Hive, at least. We do it in-house. So we collect all the data from all the different sources, if on page, we'll collect session data, time on page data, we track it all internally, and we attribute it to what A/B treatments the user is in. And then on the revenue side, we'll do the same from AdX, from all the SSPs, Prebid, etc. If you're using native widgets, then all of those will try and attribute that revenue to the A/B test treatment, and then we smush it all together and review the data by treatment, by site, source, device, etc. And in some cases, depending on the partner that you're working with, they might be able to, accept some parameter that you can easily easily sort of split the revenue or the session data across the different treatments. And in some cases, we have to basically guesstimate it. So that's a big chunk of our time going into maintaining the RAB system.
Great, thank you, Azhar. We have one more question here. Also just want to say, if anyone in the audience has a question, now would be a great time to send it. We have about 5 minutes left. So we will make sure we can see what you have in mind while we still have time. We have one question anonymously sent. This one says, my core web vitals took a hit after Google prioritized interaction to next paint. Right now, my INP is around 500 MS and search traffic is hurting because of it. What do you recommend to improve INP?
I can take that one. It's still relatively new. As you mentioned, it was just recently introduced. They don't even, so in like the Chrome Developer Console, for example, you have the ability to look at the core web vitals in real time, and that tool doesn't have INP built in yet. I don't know what their timeline on that is. We internally use the Web Vitals JS library that Chrome has. So we track all the Web Vitals internally on our own. And one of the benefits that has, and I don't remember if the INP supports this, but I know it has it for the other ones, like CLS and FID, or FCP, where it will report on the element that is doing the interaction that's causing that delay or whatever. So I'm sure it's the same for INP, and that would probably be the way I would look at it, is either live or collecting the data and reporting on which elements or which pieces of the tree site are causing the INP. That would be how we would investigate it internally, for example.
Thank you, Azhar. All right, well, if no one has any more questions for now, that's probably where we're gonna have to wrap things up. But thank you again to Azhar, Grant, and Francis for the discussion. A lot of topics hit, a lot of ideas shared. We really appreciate it, and we enjoyed talking about these real opportunities for publishers for the year ahead. For the audience, later today, we're going to share a recording with everyone who registered, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Take care, everyone. Thank you again for attending, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.